I still remember the day I found out about her affair like it was yesterday. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where the sun shines brightly and the world seems to move in slow motion. I was at home, lounging on the couch, binge-watching some mindless series. My wife, Leela, had gone out for groceries. She told me she'd stop by the store to pick up a few things for dinner. I didn't think much of it. It was a routine I had grown accustomed to. But then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. My heart sank as I read the message. Saw Leela with the grocery store manager. They were all over each other in the aisle. My mind raced, disbelief washing over me like a cold wave. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. I thought about the man, Tom. I later learned his name was, smirking behind the counter, wearing that smug look he always had. He was one of those guys who thought he was a gift to women, and here he was, apparently, trying to claim my wife. I couldn't shake the feeling of nausea that bubbled up inside me. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, that maybe this was a misunderstanding, but deep down I knew. I had seen the way Leela looked at him, the way she laughed at his jokes a little too heartily. It wasn't just friendly banter, it was something more. I threw on a jacket and stormed out of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The grocery store was only a few blocks away, and before I knew it, I was standing in the parking lot, watching Leela and Tom through the glass doors. They were laughing together, leaning in close, their bodies almost touching. The sight was like a dagger to my heart, twisting deeper with every second I watched. Anger surged through me, hot and raw. How could she do this to me? How could she betray our vows so casually? I felt like a fool, a pathetic excuse for a husband who had trusted her completely. As I stood there, helpless and broken, I realized I had two choices. I could confront her right then and there, or I could take a different route. I could make him pay. The thought of revenge crept into my mind like a dark shadow. It was intoxicating, the idea of turning the tables, of making him feel the same pain I was feeling. I had never thought of myself as someone who would stoop to such levels, but in that moment my heart was screaming for justice. I felt justified. After all, it was his fault for seducing my wife. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with possibilities. What could I do? I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't just lash out blindly. I needed a plan, something that would ensure he wouldn't be able to show his face at that store again. The thought of him losing his job sent a thrill of satisfaction through me. But as I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but wonder about the moral implications of my decision. Was I really going to ruin a man's life because of his indiscretion? I wrestled with the thoughts, guilt creeping in. Yet, the image of Leela with Tom only fueled my anger. The betrayal was fresh, the wound still raw, and the idea of revenge was becoming a siren call I couldn't ignore. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I was determined to make this happen. I would find a way to orchestrate a scandal that would lead to his downfall. I wasn't sure exactly how yet, but I had time to figure it out. The wheels in my mind began to turn, and with each passing moment my resolve solidified. I drove home, my heart heavy but my mind racing. I had crossed a line, but I was beyond the point of no return. I needed to act to reclaim my sense of control. The thought of revenge was now my guiding light, and I was ready to embrace the darkness it brought with it. The next few days were a blur of tension and turmoil. I could hardly focus on anything other than the plan that was slowly forming in my mind. I spent hours plotting and scheming, trying to figure out how to execute my revenge without getting caught. I felt like a character in one of those crime novels I used to read, the kind where the protagonist spirals into a world of darkness driven by betrayal. The difference was, this wasn't fiction. This was my life, and I was the one holding the pen. I started by gathering information about Tom. I knew he was the manager at the grocery store, but I needed more. I had to find out about his life, his habits, and any weaknesses I could exploit. I spent time observing the store from a distance, blending in with the customers, casually shopping while keeping an eye on him. I watched how he interacted with the staff, how he treated customers, and who his friends were. One thing became clear: Tom was arrogant. He strutted around the store as if he owned the place, laughing loudly and flirting shamelessly with the cashiers. It was infuriating to watch, knowing he was basking in the attention of my wife while I was left at home, feeling like a ghost. The more I watched him, the more I realized how easy it would be to dismantle his carefully crafted life. On the third day, I made my move. I decided to approach one of the cashiers, a young woman named Sarah, who seemed friendly and approachable. She was new to the store and often looked overwhelmed by Tom's domineering presence. I struck up a conversation with her, pretending to be just another customer. I asked her about her experience working there and casually mentioned how I had heard rumors about Tom's inappropriate behavior. To my surprise, Sarah didn't hesitate to open up. "He's a bit of a jerk, honestly," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I've seen him act in ways I'm not comfortable with. He flirts with everyone, but it feels like he crosses lines sometimes." My heart raced with excitement. This was the opening I needed. I encouraged her to share more, asking leading questions while feigning innocence. I had to be careful not to reveal my true intentions, but I could feel the pieces of my plan falling into place. If I could gather enough evidence of Tom's misconduct, I could create a scandal that would force the grocery store to take action. Over the next few days, I continued to build rapport with Sarah. I learned that she had been working at the store for only a couple of months and that she was unhappy with Tom's behavior. I suggested that she document any inappropriate interactions she had with him. It was a small nudge, but it set the stage for what I needed. I also started digging deeper into Tom's life outside the store. I discovered he had a social media presence, and I used that to my advantage. I created a fake profile, posing as a disgruntled customer who had heard rumors about his behavior. I made comments on his posts, subtly suggesting that I had information that could be damaging. I wanted to plant the seed of doubt to make him paranoid. With each passing day, my plan became more intricate. I crafted fake messages that I would later use as evidence against him, creating a narrative that painted him as a predator. I felt a mix of exhilaration and guilt as I plotted his downfall. I knew this was wrong, but the anger and betrayal clouded my judgment. The more I thought about Leela and what she had done, the more justified I felt in my actions. But as I moved forward, a part of me began to question the morality of what I was doing. Was I really the better person for seeking revenge? I had always prided myself on being honorable, and now I was stooping to a level I never thought I would reach. I wrestled with these thoughts at night, lying awake as the darkness closed in around me. It was during one of those sleepless nights that I made the final decision. I would confront Tom directly. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized I knew about him and Leela. I wanted him to squirm, to feel the weight of his actions pressing down on him. It was a risk, but I was willing to take it. I was already in too deep and I couldn't turn back now. With the confrontation in mind, I spent the next few days preparing. I gathered all the evidence I had collected, ready to present it as if it were fact. I practiced what I would say, rehearsing the anger and betrayal in my voice. I needed to be convincing, to ensure that Tom understood the gravity of his actions. As I walked into the grocery store on that fateful day, my heart raced with anticipation. I was ready to execute the final step of my plan, and nothing would stop me now. Walking into the grocery store felt surreal. The familiar sounds of carts rolling on the floor and the chatter of customers created an almost comforting atmosphere, but I was anything but calm. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold sweat formed on my brow as I spotted Tom behind the customer service counter. He was laughing with a couple of employees, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times, but nothing could truly prepare me for the confrontation. I approached the counter, trying to maintain an air of nonchalance as if I was just another customer with a simple inquiry. But inside I was a whirlwind of emotions, fueled by betrayal and a thirst for revenge. "Hey, Tom," I said, forcing a casual tone as I leaned against the counter. He looked up, his smile fading slightly as he recognized me. "Hey there, can I help you with something?" he replied, his voice dripping with feigned friendliness. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "I think we need to talk." His brow furrowed and I could see a flicker of concern cross his face. "About what?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "About you and Leela," I said, my voice steady. The name hung in the air like a heavy weight, and I watched as his expression shifted from curiosity to confusion, then to defensiveness. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he replied, his bravado faltering. "Oh, come on, don't play dumb with me. I know everything," I said, letting the anger seep into my words. "You think I wouldn't find out I saw you two together? You think you can just waltz into my life and take what's mine?" The shift in his demeanor was instantaneous. He straightened up, the cockiness returning to his stance. "Listen, man, you've got it all wrong. Leela and I—" "Save it," I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "I'm not here to hear your excuses. You think it's okay to disrespect my marriage, to toy with my wife's emotions. You're going to pay for this." Tom's expression hardened, and for a moment I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was trying to gauge whether I was serious or just bluffing. "You're making a big mistake," he said, his tone low and threatening. "Am I?" I shot back, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "You're the one who made the mistake by getting involved with her in the first place. You think I'm going to let you get away with this?" I had never thought of myself as a confrontational person, but in that moment I felt a rush of power. I was finally taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. Tom was no longer the smug manager. He was just a man facing the consequences of his actions. "Look, if you think you can ruin my life," he began, but I cut him off again. "I'm not going to ruin your life," I replied, my voice steady. "But I will make sure you're held accountable for what you've done. I've heard enough from Sarah about your behavior. You think you can treat people like they're beneath you, that you can flirt with anyone you want without consequences." His expression shifted to one of annoyance, but I could see the hint of worry behind it. "You do know what you're talking about," he said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "You're just jealous." "Jealous? No, Tom, I'm furious," I said, lowering my voice again. "But it's not just about jealousy, it's about respect. You've crossed a line and I'm not going to let it slide." The tension between us was palpable. I could see other customers glancing over, sensing the confrontation. I knew I was drawing attention, but at that moment I didn't care. I wanted Tom to feel exposed, vulnerable. I wanted him to realize that he was not untouchable. "I'm going to make sure the higher-ups hear about this," I continued, my voice firm. "You think I can't make that happen? You're going to regret ever messing with my marriage." Tom's bravado wavered, and for the first time I could see the fear in his eyes. "You wouldn't dare," he replied, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed him. "Oh, I would," I retorted, feeling a sense of satisfaction wash over me, "and I can prove it." I turned to leave, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I felt exhilarated, empowered. I had confronted him, and I had made my intentions clear. The next step was to follow through with my plan and ensure that Tom's actions would not go unpunished. As I walked out of the grocery store, I felt a mix of triumph and anxiety. I knew I was walking a dangerous path, but the thrill of revenge was intoxicating. I had set the wheels in motion, and there was no turning back now. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that crept into my mind. Was I really doing the right thing? What if this escalated beyond my control? I pushed those thoughts aside, determined to see my plan through to the end. I was ready to unleash the full force of my revenge, and I would make sure Tom paid for his betrayal. The days following my confrontation with Tom were a whirlwind of planning and execution. I felt like a chess player, carefully moving my pieces into place, anticipating the outcome of each move. The adrenaline from the confrontation had fueled my determination, and I was more focused than ever on dismantling Tom's life piece by piece. I reached out to Sarah again, asking her to gather more evidence of Tom's inappropriate behavior. I encouraged her to document any instances where he crossed the line, whether it was through inappropriate comments or advances. I knew that if I collected enough evidence, I could create a narrative that would be impossible for the grocery store's management to ignore. "Just keep a record of everything," I told her, leaning in conspiratorially. "If he's doing something wrong, he needs to be held accountable." She seemed hesitant at first, but I could see the fire in her eyes as she recounted her own experiences with Tom. "I don't like the way he treats us," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like he thinks he's untouchable." That was exactly the mindset I wanted to exploit. I encouraged her to speak to some of her coworkers to see if they had similar experiences. The more people I could rally against Tom, the stronger my case would be. I felt like a puppet master, pulling strings and orchestrating a rebellion against the grocery store manager. As I continued my investigation, I also started to gather information on the grocery store's corporate structure. I discovered who the regional managers were and how to contact them. I crafted a detailed email outlining my concerns about Tom's behavior, including the evidence I had gathered. It felt like I was preparing a formal complaint, and I wanted to ensure it was as compelling as possible. I spent hours crafting that email, making sure to include specific instances of misconduct, all while keeping my identity hidden. I wanted to make sure that it didn't come back to me. I was walking a tightrope, balancing my desire for revenge with the need to protect myself from any fallout. Finally, the day came when I felt ready to send the email. I had gathered enough information from Sarah and her coworkers to paint a damning picture of Tom's character. I took a deep breath, hovering over the send button. My heart raced as I thought about the consequences of my actions. Was I really prepared to ruin his life? But then I thought about Leela. I thought about the betrayal, the pain, and the anger that had consumed me since I had discovered the affair. In that moment, I felt a surge of resolve. I clicked send, watching the email disappear into the digital ether. The next few days were agonizing. I waited anxiously for a response, my mind racing with possibilities. Would they take my complaint seriously? Would Tom be called in for questioning? I felt a mix of excitement and dread as I imagined the fallout. Then, on the fifth day after sending the email, I received a reply. It was from the regional manager asking for a meeting to discuss the allegations. My heart raced as I read the words. This was it. My plan was coming to fruition. I spent the next few days preparing for the meeting, rehearsing what I would say. I wanted to come off as credible and concerned, not as a vengeful husband seeking retribution. I practiced my delivery, making sure to focus on the facts and the evidence. I felt like I was stepping into a courtroom, ready to present my case. The meeting was set for that Friday afternoon. I arrived at the corporate office, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. The sterile environment felt cold and unwelcoming, but I steeled myself for what was to come. I was ready to unleash my carefully crafted narrative. When I walked into the conference room, I was greeted by the regional manager, a tall man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He introduced himself and gestured for me to take a seat. I could feel the weight of his gaze as I sat down, and I knew I had to make this count. "Thank you for coming in today," he said, his tone professional. "I understand you have some serious concerns about one of our managers." "Yes, thank you for meeting with me," I replied, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. "I've been a loyal customer of your store for years, but I've recently witnessed some troubling behavior from Tom, the manager." I launched into my account, outlining the incidents I had documented, emphasizing the patterns of inappropriate behavior. I spoke passionately, painting a picture of a workplace environment that was toxic and unsafe for employees. The regional manager listened attentively, taking notes as I spoke. As I detailed the evidence, I could see the seriousness of the situation sinking in. I felt a rush of power as I realized that I was finally taking control of my narrative. I was no longer the victim. I was the one wielding the sword. When I finished, the regional manager leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "This is very concerning," he said slowly. "We take these allegations seriously, and I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We will conduct a thorough investigation." I felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. My plan was unfolding just as I had envisioned. I had planted the seeds of doubt in the corporate structure, and now it was only a matter of time before Tom faced the consequences of his actions. As I left the meeting, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. I had orchestrated the downfall of the man who had betrayed my trust. But as the adrenaline began to fade, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was crossing a line I might never be able to uncross. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, but I couldn't ignore the moral complexities of my actions. Was I really the hero in this story, or was I becoming the villain? I pushed those thoughts aside, determined to see my plan through to the end. The days following my meeting with the regional manager felt like an eternity. I was on edge, constantly checking my phone for updates, my mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next. Each time I heard a notification, my heart would leap, only to plummet when it was just a mundane message. I was consumed by the anticipation of Tom's downfall, yet deep down, I was grappling with a growing unease about my own actions. I had successfully planted the seeds of doubt in the corporate structure, but the reality of what I was doing began to weigh heavily on me. Was I really the righteous husband seeking justice, or had I become a puppet master, pulling strings to orchestrate someone else's misery? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming the very thing I despised. Then, on the 8th day after my initial complaint, I received a call from the regional manager. My heart raced as I answered, anticipation flooding my veins. "Hello, this is Mark from the corporate office," he said. "I wanted to follow up regarding your allegations against Tom." "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've conducted our investigation, and I'm afraid we've found some troubling evidence that corroborates your claims. We've received statements from several employees, including Sarah, regarding inappropriate behavior on Tom's part." A surge of satisfaction coursed through me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a pang of guilt. I had helped to bring down a man, and now I was forced to reckon with the consequences of my actions. "What does that mean for him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're in the process of terminating his employment," Mark replied. "We believe it's in the best interest of the store and its employees. I wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention." I hung up the phone, a mix of triumph and dread washing over me. Tom was going to lose his job, and I had played a crucial role in that downfall. But as the reality of my actions set in, I felt a hollow victory. I had sought revenge, but at what cost? I spent the next few days in a haze, avoiding Leela as much as possible. I didn't want to face her and explain what I had done. I feared that if she knew the lengths I had gone to, it would only drive a deeper wedge between us. I had acted out of anger and betrayal, and now I was left with the consequences of my choices. Finally, I couldn't put it off any longer. One evening, I found Leela sitting on the couch, flipping through channels absent-mindedly. She looked up as I entered the room, her expression shifting from indifference to curiosity. "Hey," she said, her tone cautious. "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. "I've been busy," I replied, avoiding her gaze. "Just dealing with some stuff at work." She frowned, clearly not buying my excuse. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "Yeah, I know," I said, forcing a smile. "I appreciate it." But as I sat down next to her, I felt the weight of my secret pressing down on me. I wanted to tell her everything, to come clean about Tom and the lengths I had gone to in order to get him fired. But I feared her reaction. Would she see me as a hero for avenging her honor, or would she view me as a monster for orchestrating the destruction of another person's life? Days turned into a week, and the tension between us grew. Leela would occasionally bring up Tom, asking if I had seen him at the store or if I had heard anything about the situation. Each time I felt a knot twist in my stomach. I couldn't bring myself to face the truth, to admit that I had played a direct role in his downfall. Then one night everything came to a head. We were sitting at the dinner table, the silence between us palpable. I could feel the weight of my secret pressing heavily on my chest, and I knew I couldn't keep it hidden any longer. "Leela," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked up, concern etched on her face. "What is it?" "I found out about you and Tom," I blurted out, my heart racing. "And I did something." Her eyes widened, and I could see the realization wash over her. "What do you mean? What did you do?" I confronted him. I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "And then I reported him. I gathered evidence against him, and he's been fired." Silence hung in the air, and I watched as a mix of emotions crossed her face: shock, anger, and something else I couldn't quite place. "You did what?" she finally asked, her voice rising. "You went behind my back and got him fired. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing." I defended, my anger flaring up. "He disrespected our marriage. He took advantage of you." Leela stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "And you think that makes it okay? You ruined someone's life without even talking to me about it first." "I was trying to protect you," I shouted back, frustration boiling over. "You were the one who was hurt. I wanted to make things right." "You didn't make anything right, you made it worse," she yelled, tears brimming in her eyes. "You've turned this into a mess, and for what? To feel like you had control." In that moment, I realized the gravity of my actions. I had acted out of anger, and in doing so, I had not only hurt Tom but had also jeopardized my marriage. The thrill of revenge had clouded my judgment, and now I was left with the fallout. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice breaking as I faced the consequences of my choices. "I don't know," she replied, her voice trembling. "I need time to think." With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with the weight of my decisions. I had sought revenge, but I had lost something far more valuable in the process: trust, and the fragile bond that held our marriage together. As I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, I realized that I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I was left with the bitter taste of revenge, and the haunting realization that it might not bring the closure I had so desperately sought. The days that followed Leela's outburst were some of the darkest I had ever experienced. The house felt empty, a hollow shell filled with echoes of our arguments and unspoken words. I tried to reach out to her, but each time I did, she would retreat further into herself, shutting me out as if I were a stranger. I was haunted by the consequences of my actions, a man who had sought revenge but had ultimately driven a wedge between himself and the woman he loved. I spent my nights tossing and turning, replaying the events in my mind. I thought about Tom, the way I had orchestrated his downfall, and how it felt like a victory at first. But now, it felt like a betrayal against my own principles. I had become a monster in my pursuit of justice, and the weight of that realization was crushing. One evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah, the cashier who had helped me gather evidence against Tom. "I heard about Tom getting fired. I'm so sorry. I hope you're okay," it read. I stared at the message for a long moment, the guilt washing over me anew. I had used her to further my agenda, to exact my revenge, and now I was left feeling like a puppet master who had cut the strings. I replied, thanking her for her concern but feeling hollow inside. She had been a pawn in my game, and I didn't know how to reconcile that. Days turned into weeks, and still, Leela and I barely spoke. The distance between us was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had irreparably damaged our relationship. I tried to reach out to apologize, but every attempt was met with silence or cold indifference. It was as if the warmth we once shared had been extinguished, leaving nothing but a chilling void. One night, as I lay in bed, I finally summoned the courage to confront my actions. I had to face the truth. What I had done to Tom was wrong, and I needed to make amends, not just to him but to Leela as well. I realized that revenge hadn't brought me satisfaction. It had only deepened my sense of loss and regret. The next day, I made a decision. I would reach out to Tom. I didn't know how he would respond, but I needed to take responsibility for my actions. I found his contact information online and took a deep breath before drafting an email. I poured out my feelings, admitting my mistakes and expressing my sincere regret for what I had done. I didn't expect forgiveness, but I hoped he would understand that I was trying to make things right. After hitting send, I felt a mix of anxiety and relief. I had taken the first step toward redemption, and now I could only wait for his response. In the meantime, I focused on trying to mend my relationship with Leela. I started small, cooking her favorite meals, leaving little notes around the house, and apologizing for my actions, hoping she would eventually come around. Weeks passed, and just when I thought I would never hear from Tom, I received a reply. I opened the email hesitantly, bracing myself for the worst. "Your name," it began. "I appreciate your honesty. I can't say I'm not hurt by what you did, but I understand that emotions can drive us to make rash decisions. I accept your apology and I hope you can find peace in this situation. It's important that you focus on your marriage now. I wish you both the best." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Tom's response was gracious, and though I couldn't change what had happened, I could at least find solace in knowing that he had found it in his heart to forgive. With that weight lifted, I turned my focus back to Leela. I knew I had a long way to go, but I was determined to prove to her that I could be better. I started attending couples therapy, hoping to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It was a difficult journey, filled with tears and painful conversations, but slowly we began to reconnect. Leela and I learned to communicate openly, sharing our fears, regrets, and hopes for the future. Wasn't easy, but we were both willing to work on our relationship. I realized that love is not just about the good times, it's about facing the challenges together and growing stronger as a result. Months later, as we sat together on the couch, I turned to her, feeling a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. "I'm sorry for everything," I said, my voice steady. "I know I hurt you and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." She looked at me, her eyes softening. "I know. It's going to take time, but I believe we can heal." As we embraced, I felt a sense of renewal wash over me. I had walked through the darkness of betrayal and revenge, but I was emerging into the light, ready to face the future with Leela by my side. I had learned that while revenge may feel sweet in the moment, it ultimately leads to a bitter end. And in that moment, I knew that love, forgiveness, and the willingness to change were the true paths to healing. It was time to leave the past behind and embrace a new beginning. With Leela, I knew I could face anything.